Good morning, welcome back from our adjournment. We now have our issues sorted and we now have, as I take attendance, everyone is in attendance this evening. I now move to the welcome to country.
City Council acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land on which we are gathered. Acknowledging their gratitude that we share this land today, but also acknowledging the cost of that sharing and our hope that we can move to a place of justice and partnership together.
Thank you, Councillor Kunzelman. We'll now move on to the opening prayer. Councillor Tully, would you mind leading us in prayer?
Thank you. Heavenly Father, we seek you to be with us in this meeting today.
Sorry, I'll ask you to, thank you.
Assist us to be an example to others, bringing strength and encouragement in whatever we do, and equip us for the ongoing challenges as they arise. Give us the guidance to continue to make wise decisions for both the short and long-term benefit of our city and our community, regardless however difficult and unpopular some will be. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Councillor Tully. We'll now move on to apologies and leave of absence, and there are none. Move on to item 5, condolences, and there are none. Move on to number 6, tributes, and there are none. We move on to 7, presentation of petitions. And we have received a petition from Jim Madden MP, the member for Ipswich West, on behalf of the residents of Ipswich, requesting Ipswich City Council make application for a South East Queensland Community Stimulus Package grant for funding to build a fence around Tony Merrill Park at Leichhardt. So in accordance with section 8.12 of the Council's meeting procedures policies, I present this motion as that this petition be received and referred to a council officer or committee for consideration and to report back to council. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Fichtner, thank you. Would anyone like to speak to it?
Yes. Just through you, Mayor, I'd like to send my thanks to Jim Madden MP for this presentation. Tony Merrill Park has seen, since Councillor Doyle and I have been elected as the representatives for Division 3, quite a lot of turmoil with lots of problems down there with trail bikes. We're hoping, we encourage council officers to come back to us with a potential solution, and we look forward to seeing how we can make the park more secure for the children and families in our Leichhardt 1 mile area.
Yeah. I think Councillor Fichtner, yourself and the Deputy Mayor have spent a bit of time with police as well in working on through issues there as well. Thank you. I then put that matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And I see it's unanimous. Thank you very much. We move on to item 8, presentations and deputations, and there are none. Move on to item 9, public participation, there is nil. Item 10, declarations of interest. May I please open up the floor to see if anyone has any conflicts of interest or declarations of interest? Yes, Councillor Fichtner.
Yeah, Mayor. So in accordance with section 150 EQ of the Local Government Act of 2009, I, Councillor Andrew Fichtner, inform the meeting that I have declarable conflict of interest in item number 14.6, Ipswich Central Redevelopment Committee's report. The nature of my declarable conflict of interest is my business interest in both Bar Heisenberg Proprietary Limited and A1A Advanced Proprietary Limited located at the top of town in Ipswich. I propose to deal with this conflict by leaving the room while the matter is discussed and voted on.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fichtner. Are there any other declarations of interest? Thank you, Councillor Madsen.
In accordance with section 150 EQ of the Local Government Act 2009, I, Councillor Jacob Madsen, inform the meeting that I have a declarable conflict of interest in item 14.6 titled Ipswich Central Redevelopment Committee's report. The nature of the declarable conflict of interest is that I'm on the executive of the Ipswich Trades Hall and Labour Day Committee, and our building, the Ipswich Trades Hall, is immediately adjacent to the Ipswich Central redevelopment. I intend to resolve my conflict of interest by leaving the meeting room while the matter is considered and voted on.
Thank you, Councillor Madsen. Are there any other declarations of interest? Thank you very much. We'll move on to item 1.1, confirmation of the minutes of the ordinary meeting. May I have a mover, please? Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Kunzelman. Would anyone like to speak to a relevant, anyone like to speak to a relevant council officer or discussion? No, I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And it's unanimous and passed. Thank you. We now move on to item 2, which is mayoral minute. And this morning I have 3 mayoral minutes, as the councillors are aware of. And the first one is on the Civic Events Policy and Anzac Day Amendment. And in that, I recommend that Section 5 in the scope of Council Civic Events Policy be amended to include the following addition. Anzac Day commemorative services provide support through community funding and in-kind support in line with the community funding and support policy. And B, that Council establishes a new Anzac Day commemorative services funding and in-kind support grant program to be made available to organising committees this year and in the future through an open and transparent process for the purpose of funding operational costs associated with the delivery of these events per guidelines to be developed in consultation with councillors. So as a mayoral minute, it's moved and seconded. To speak to it, I'd like to say that Anzac Day is a sacred day for all Australians. It is an important time to remember the sacrifices of those who have gone before us, those who have laid down their lives or suffered great hardship to protect Australians' way of life. Anzac Day is a day where our nation stops and recognises the sacrifices that our veterans and serving members of the Australian Defence Force make. By coming together as a community, we say to those who put duty to their nation ahead of their own personal safety and comforts, we say, you matter, what you did matters, and you are in our hearts. Our local RAF base Amberley is the largest Air Force base in Australia, and for the past 81 years RAF base Amberley has played a major role in supporting and being home to squadrons, enabling the Air Force to become an expeditionary force across the world, not only engaging in wars, but undertaking a range of peacekeeping and humanitarian missions. The base, over the last 10 to 15 years, has also expanded to include Army units and Navy personnel, who are also proud members of our community. We are a proud garrison town, deeply connected to the men and women who have served our nation. And Anzac Day is an important day for the Ipswich community, as we unite to remember the sacrifice these men and women made for their country. Council is currently working closely with 16 Anzac Day commemorative service organisations to deliver 22 services in Burvale, Brassel, Bundamba, Ebbw Vale, Goodna, Grantchester, Limestone Hill, Ipswich, Marburg, North Ipswich, 1 Mile, Pine Mountain, Redbank Plains, Rosewood, Springfield Central and Wood End. Through recent community consultation, it has come to the attention of Council that some organisations will not conduct a march due to the requirements of Queensland Health's COVID Safe Events Framework. It also came to our attention that Council's civic events policy does not explicitly include support for the range of Anzac Day commemorative services in our city. This motion proposes to change the policy in recognition of the undying spirit of the Anzacs, with its qualities of courage, mateship and sacrifice, which continues to resonate and be relevant to our local identity. This motion proposes to address the clear inadequacies in the current policy by establishing an Anzac Day commemorative services grant program to be made available to organising committees this year and in the future, through an open and transparent process for the purpose of funding operational costs associated with the delivery of these events per guidelines, which will be developed in consultation with councillors. And in the attachment that I think will be placed in the minutes, I have 3 attachments. One is the proposed civic events policy with the proposed amendments as per recommendation A. I thought it would be also good for the public to see the current civic events policy, which was set in 2019, but also the preceding policy for Anzac, entitled Anzac Day Commemoration Policy from 1996. And you'll see that this is a vast improvement to address the inadequacies of both those policies. I'll open it up for any discussion. There being no discussion, I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous. Thank you very much. My second mayoral motion is the appointment of an acting Chief Executive Officer. Pursuant to Section 195 of the Local Government Act of 2019, I recommend that Council A note the resignation of Chief Executive Officer Mr David Farmer, effective from the 9th of April 2021. B, that we appoint Sonia Cooper as the Acting Chief Executive Officer. And C, I authorise the Mayor to negotiate the terms of the engagement for the Acting Chief Executive Officer. In speaking to this, the Chief Executive Officer of Ipswich City Council, David Farmer, has tendered his resignation effective from the 9th of April 2021. And so, David, this is your last ordinary council meeting. I know we'll probably speak to it at the end, but I want to thank you very much for the honesty, the integrity and the competency that you've brought to this organisation. And we sincerely wish you all the best in your new endeavours. Thank you very much, David. On behalf of the community, Ipswich City Council thanks Mr Farmer for his service and his wishes, and wishes him all the best for his future as the role of CEO for Central Coast Council in New South Wales. In due course, in accordance with Section 194 of the Local Government Act 2009, Council will undertake a recruitment process to appoint a suitably qualified CEO. During the vacancy period, and whilst recruitment is underway, Council will appoint Sonia Cooper as Acting CEO from the existing executive leadership team. The period of tenure for this role is expected to be 4 to 6 months, contingent on the successful appointment of a new CEO. I'll open the matter up for discussion. No? In that case, I'll then put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous. Thank you very much, Sonia. The third and the last mayoral motion for this morning is the recruitment of the ongoing CEO. So pursuant to Section 194 of the Local Government Act 2009, it is recommended that A, Council commence a process for the appointment of the Chief Executive Officer. B, Council establish a Chief Executive Officer recruitment panel consisting of myself, the Deputy Mayor, Marnie Doyle, Councillor Andrew Fechner and Councillor Jacob Madsen, and an independent member selected by the panel. C, the process for the appointment of the CEO will be managed by the Office of the Mayor, supported by Council's People and Culture team and appropriate external partners as required, such as legal and other advisory services, to be funded from an appropriate cost centre. And D, Council authorise the engagement of a qualified executive recruitment partner by the panel through a robust procurement process, supported by Council's procurement team to be funded from an appropriate cost centre. E, the Office of the Mayor liaises with the Department of State Development, Infrastructure, Local Government and Planning to ensure the appointment process meets the highest standards in accordance with legislative requirements. F, the panel is responsible for shortlisting candidates in consultation with the executive recruitment partner through a robust process. And G, the final selection and appointment process is determined by full council. In speaking to this motion proposes a robust executive recruitment governance framework and process to ensure council is best placed to attract a suitably qualified and experienced CEO to lead Ipswich City Council. Key elements of this process include establishing the recruitment panel, as referred to in the motion, but also the composition of this panel ensures a broad representation of councillors and will provide a robust and efficient recruitment process. It will also ensure that council on the panel is best placed to deliver a robust process that meets the highest standards and complies with relative legislative requirements. This multi-stage process enables efficient shortlisting by a professionally supported and concentrated panel. The panel will also provide regular updates to councillors on the progress of the process. The ultimate appointment of the decision will be by full council. Once council selects a successful delegate, it will resolve to appoint that candidate at a meeting of council and delegate to the Mayor the responsibility of negotiating the terms of employment in consultation with the panel. I open the item up for discussion. Councillor Fechner.
Just through you, Mayor, looking at recommendation C, that the process of the appointment of the CEO will be managed by the Office of the Mayor, supported by Council's People and Culture team. Would it be prudent to say will be managed by the Office of the Mayor and the selection panel?
Yeah, happy to put that in there.
Yep. So I just proposed that slight amendment there, Vicky.
Well, as the mover and seconder, I'm happy to accept that. So we have the Office of the Mayor, or the Office of the Mayor and Selection Panel. Thank you.
Awesome. And just for completeness and consistency, E, the Office of the Mayor and the Selection Panel liaises with the department, if you're okay with that amendment.
Yeah, of
Mayor.
course. Thank you, Councillor Fichtner.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. I see it's unanimous. Thank you very much. We now move to item 13.1, which is the drug and alcohol policy. And the recommendation from the report is A, that Council notes the contents of this report, and B, that a report provided to a future meeting of Council with a proposed drug and alcohol policy for councillors that outlines how councils can continue to comply with their legislative obligations under the Code of Conduct for Councils in Queensland. Would anyone like to speak to the relevant council officer on this? No? In that case, I'll open the matter up for, then I'll ask for a mover. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Ireland. I'll then open it up for discussion.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to add that it's important that to progress this matter in a timely fashion, council officers should be writing to the Office of Independent Assessor and the LGAQ, seeking guidance and direction on how councils in Queensland, including ourselves, can implement a policy like this, taking into consideration the impacts of the human rights legislation, as well as the framework intended to be imposed by the Office of Independent Assessor, given it will be they who will manage and impose potential penalties for a breach of any such drug and alcohol policy. I would just like to point out that we as a group have embraced the position of drug and alcohol testing going forward. We acknowledge that it's the overarching behavioural standard for councillors. It's outlined in the Code of Conduct for councillors in Queensland, specifically the Behavioural Standard 1.5, to ensure that their behaviour or capacity to perform their responsibilities as a councillor is not impaired by the use of substances that may put them or others at risk while performing their duties. For example, alcohol, illegal drugs or prescribed, non-prescribed and or restricted substances. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. Any other discussion? No, in that case I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And it's unanimous. Thank you. I apologise, I called that item 13.1. It's actually item 3. We now move on to item 4, the reception and consideration of committee reports. We'll move on to the Growth and Infrastructure and Waste Committee report. That is a committee that has full delegation. So I ask for, as the chair, I'll move that. And may I ask for a seconder? Councillor Fichtner, thank you. Would anyone like to ask the relevant council officer for that report? No. In that case, I'll move it to any discussion? I'll move it to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. It's passed. It's unanimous. 4.2, the Governance and Transparency Committee. The recommendation is that the Council adopt the recommendations of the Governance and Transparency Committee as of the 11th of March. I'll hand over to the chair of that committee if you wish to move that report.
Happy to move it.
Happy to move it. a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Doyle. Councillor Madsen, as the Chair, would you like to speak to that report?
There's 6 items. There wasn't a great deal of conflict. In discussion last week, it's all pretty agreeable. It's there in the report. I'd recommend that they be moved in full.
Thank you. Any discussion? No? I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, now move on to item 4.3, which is the Community Culture, Arts and Sports Committee. And that recommendation is that Council adopt the recommendations of the Community Culture, Arts and Sports Committee report of the 11th of March. And I'll just look over to the Chair. Were there any exceptions to that?
No, I moved the report, Mayor. Just a couple of highlights to mention. Committee last
Yeah,
week.
before you speak to it, I'll ask for a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Ireland. Okay, Councillor Fechner, would you like to speak to this?
Yeah, I don't wish to call any council officer up to the lectern to answer any questions, but a few highlights for the benefit of the whole of the council. Very excitably, we endorsed the community development strategy, which is a great piece of work designed by council officers to help manage the way that we engage with our community groups moving forward. The strategy circulates around equity, inclusion, and offering a hand up rather than a handout from the organisation moving forward. So that is very, very noteworthy. Secondly, we actually appointed the new operator of the Riverview Community Centre, Queensland Family Support Services. So the community down there welcomes them with open arms and can't wait to get in and see what they have to offer. And lastly, we had a milestone report of the Indigenous Accord, and we heard about all of the wonderful things that we're doing to make sure that that document is being fulfilled by the organisation and not just lip service from the elected representatives. And then we moved Councillor Ireland's notice of motion up to this ordinary meeting, so we'll be discussing them later. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fechner. I think it was the Indigenous Accord, that milestone report's the first one we've received as our 6-monthly report. It was really good to see the progress. Thank you very much for that. Is there any other discussion on this item? No, I'll then put the recommendation to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. It's unanimous and carried. I now move on to item 4.4. Economic and Industry Development Committee, and that recommendation is that Council adopt the recommendations of the Economic and Industry Development Committee of the 11th of March 2021. And I'll just look over to the Chair, Councillor Johnny. Are there any exceptions to that report?
No.
Okay. So I'll move all of those. Would you like to move those motions
In a batch?
together?
Yep.
And I'll second that, Mayor.
Thank you very much. We would like to, the Chair, would you like to speak to the report?
Just briefly, in relation to the update on the Food Truck Friendly Council and the shortening of the approval process from monthly to 48 hours or less, and that being very significant for saving time in our organisation as well as saving pain for our constituents that are looking to go forth with their food truck. So.
I'm really impressed, Councillor, but also with Councillor Madsen. I'm moving that permits for the food trucks to go from 4 weeks to 24 hours, and that's opened the floodgates, I think, of other permits as well. So thank you very much for that initiative, and thank you to the organisation for working across different divisions and departments to get that going. Is there any other discussion on that report? In that case, I'll put the recommendation to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And it's unanimous and carried. Thank you. We now move on to item 4.5, the Environment and Sustainability Committee. And that report is that Council adopt the recommendations of the Environment and Sustainability Committee report of the 11th of March 2021. Councillor Milligan, as the chair of that, are there any exemptions to that report?
Mayor, no, there are not, and I move that that Council adopt the recommendations of the committee report.
Thank you. Is there a...
Could I just ask that we move item 1, 2 and 4 and pull out item 3 for discussion?
Okay. So the proposal to you as the mover,
I can
Councillor Milligan, is that we'll...
So I don't think we need to move that separately, but...
Excuse me, Councillor Milligan, I'm speaking. That we'll put item 1, 2 and 4 to the vote, and we'll put 3 separately. Correct? Is that acceptable to you, Councillor Milligan?
Yes, that's fine,
Yes.
Mayor.
Thank you. May I have a seconder to that? That 1, 2 and 4? Yep, Councillor Jonick. Thank you very much. Would anyone like to speak to the relevant council officers on 1, 2 and 4? No? Is there any discussion? No? In that case, I'll put items 1, 2 and 4 to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous. Thank you very much. We'll now move to number 3. I'll just go to that. And that particular motion is that council not pursue the acquisition of the property identified as 2 to 26 Eugene Street, Bellbird Park through EnviroPlan levy based upon findings of an initial desktop assessment and an independent curbside evaluation of the land. Instead, the protection or acquisition of land adjacent to Woogera Creek will be considered under the planning process as part of any future development proposal.
Excuse me, Mayor, it was 12 to 26.
Oh, did I, my apologies, 12 to 26. Would anyone like to speak to a council officer before we... No? Do I have someone that will move that recommendation? Councillor Fechner? And a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Milligan. I would like to open up for discussion.
So I just wanted to pull this out and acknowledge the EnviroPlan for one, and its achievement so far in its 25 years, and all of the land that it has purchased and the conservation that it has achieved in that time. I understand the EnviroPlan's purpose, measurements and methodology when it comes to assessing land for purchase. But this balance of green and urban does not land solely on council. This responsibility should weigh heavily on the shoulders of the state and federal governments also, especially considering that our local government area doesn't have a national park in its area. These conversations of conserving green spaces and natural bush within our urbanised areas need to start now, and that's reflecting in our corporate plan and how important this balance of green and urban is to our residents. If we did pursue this purchase, it is no way guaranteed that the offer would be successful. However, the conversation gets started, if nothing else. So I put my my kids' minds in this decision to pull this item out, and I thought, what would Livia and Jordan think in 30 years' time of their mum wanting to put forth a purchase proposal for this land? And I think that they would be proud that we wanted to start the conversation and at least try to conserve natural bush within our urbanised areas. I know that Queensland as a state is a lot greener than other states and cities with a percentage of green space within urbanised areas. But that being said, if we lose pockets of these natural bush areas within these spaces, that percentage will decrease, and our heat islands, urban heat islands, will increase. So I don't think my children in 30 years' time will look back at me and go, "Mum, I can't believe that you pulled that item out and wanted to push that conversation forward and try to purchase." Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jonick. open up for any other discussion items. Councillor Fickner?
Just through you, Mayor, and reflecting on last week's committee, it's something that we all did agonise over. It is a huge financial investment and will in fact destabilise the Enviro Plan monies, which have a strategy behind them for the acquisitions as endorsed by Council. It's something that is obviously a very difficult discussion to have with the community. When we're talking about conserving green space and finding the right mix of green and development. But I think it's also important to reflect on, and to read through that report to truly understand why we've come to make this decision. Not only was it a financial decision, but also the logistics of managing a large pocket of land and people potentially going on the land and starting fires, and what are the ongoing costs to the council on top of the purchase price to making sure that that parcel of land stays secure and what we actually do with it. I resonate with the words of Councillor Jonick, and I think that it is important, to acknowledge, future generations and consider intergenerational equity. So, it is a difficult decision, but that's why we sit around this table. We have to make a decision that's in the best interest of the city as well.
Thank you. I concur with you, Councillor Fickner. I empathise with you, Councillor Johnny, because I know that your residents in Division 2 are very passionate about this issue. They've spoken to many of us about it. I guess I take a whole of city view and noting the broader strategic plan of the Enviro Plan, and look at the fact that part of that is the acquisition of land adjacent to Woogaroo Creek as part of our broader strategic way of protecting our environment and the flora and fauna in our city. And I also will note that land was also designated back in 1994 as residential as well, which means the valuation for that land is quite high, and it would have a massive impact, I think, citywide on actually our proper environment conservation work. But I do note, Councillor Johnny, probably Councillor Tully as well, that your residents are very passionate about this particular land. Any other discussion?
Just in closing, I understand that it's, these decisions don't have to be black and white. It doesn't have to land fully on our shoulders for the responsibility of funding this. We can go and knock on doors. Looking outward for and future-proofing our city, looking at our city in 100 and 200 years' time, this is what we need to start conversing about. So, I understand fully where my other councillors are coming from. I just,
Any other discussion? I'll just check. As the mover, Councillor, you have a right of reply, or if you'd like to, or you're fine. Okay, thank you very much. In that case, I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour of the recommendation that council not pursue the acquisition, please raise your hand. And I'll look around. So it's myself, the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Fickner, Councillor Eiling, Councillor Madsen, Councillor Milligan and Councillor Kunzelman. Against? See Councillor Jonick and Councillor Tully against. Thank you. So the motion is carried. We now move on to item 4.6, the Ipswich Central Redevelopment Committee, and that recommendation is that council adopt the recommendations of the Ipswich Central Redevelopment Committee report.
Excuse me, Mayor. Sorry, did we have to move item B, of the last...
Sorry, you can proceed your motion.
Which was your amendment to add this, request the spreadsheet.
So could you say that again?
So on that item that we were just discussing and we just voted on, there was, there was recommendation A and B, and we just... Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah,
My apologies.
Yep, no, correct point there, that during the that committee meeting, we did have a B, and that spreadsheet has been provided to the councillors. Yeah, but thank you, please. So I'll now just pause while Councillor Fleck and Councillor Madsen leave. Thank you. Item 4.6, the Ipswich Central Redevelopment Committee. And the recommendation is that Council adopt the recommendations of the Ipswich Central Redevelopment Committee report of the 11th of March. And I'm just looking to the Chair to see if there were any exemptions from that. There were 6 items there.
Thank you, Mayor. No.
There isn't. Thank you very much. Would anyone like to switch any relevant council officers on this report? No? I then call for someone to move that. I'm guessing yourself, Deputy Mayor. A seconder, Councillor Kunzelman. Thank you. I now open the matter up for discussion. Would you like to provide some highlights, Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to highlight a couple of issues. Item 5, the Retail Subcommittee, the Sub-Project Steering Committee report. That report and the ongoing committee meetings, of which I attend as an observer. We always get an update on the status of the leasing program, and I'm delighted with the progress to date by the team down in the Nicholas Street precinct, and just look forward. So I'm delighted by the interest that's being expressed by prospective tenants and the show of confidence within our revitalised Ipswich CBD. So I look forward to being in a position to share the finer detail. I know residents are chomping at the bit to learn who the new tenants might be down in the Nicholas Street precinct. So as soon as we're able to share those details, we absolutely will. The other highlight, I'd just like to call out the Nicholas Street Precinct Communications Engagement and Activation Monthly Report. That's the report that gives us an update on the activation down in the precinct and the events. And, you know, yet again on the weekend we hosted a food truck event, and it was a resounding success. And it's just wonderful to see so many families out enjoying the entertainment on the stage, and enjoying the food and just the venue generally. Just like to commend staff. These events are happening almost every week, and to date we haven't had any huge teething problems, which you would normally expect with a project of this size.
Yes, definitely. That Future Flavours was very popular on the weekend, and I know in the report there's some tantalising details of what's to come too, isn't it? The Tulma Tapas, the Gin Festival, the monthly Secret Laneway series, and a whole heap of other, the Spark Festival. It's very exciting.
Yes, Mayor, the monthly, the Laneway event is top secret, so yeah, that will be an exciting event for residents. So there's lots of exciting events coming up, and again, the space is being activated as it was intended, as, you know, a food and entertainment precinct.
Yeah. And I'm delighted to see Kitchen the Switch return as well. Wonderful.
Excuse me, Mayor.
Yes, Councillor Kunzelman.
Just to report that I attended the handmade markets on Saturday as well. The crowds are extraordinary. The environment was really good. It's a really good vibe. Lots of people congratulating us on any effort that we've made down there. It's really good.
Thank you, Mayor, and I concur with Councillor Kunzelman. It's great to be walking around and just overhearing the excitement and, you know, proud residents walking around just brimming with confidence about the new precinct. And yes, the markets have been a huge success. Thank you to the Ipswich Handmade Markets. I think on the weekend we drew close to 8,000 to 9,000 visitors to those markets. So,
Wow, incredible. If there's no other discussion, I'll put the recommendation to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous. Thank you very much. I'll now pause before we go on to item 5, the officers' reports. I should say item 5, then item 15.1. Thank you, Councillor Fichtner. Councillor Manson. This next item is an item that we've had a lot of discussion on as council and poured over consultation reports and so on. And it's the naming of places and spaces in the CBD. And I note the report has a number of 7 recommendations. So I propose that we do split these and deal with one at a time. So the very first one is that council determine the name for the new Ipswich City Council Administration Building. And I think, Councillor Fichtner, did you wish to alter that?
Yeah, I propose that
Yes.
council name the new administration building, 1 Nicholas Street.
1 Nicholas Street, thank you. And do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Kunzelman. Would anyone like to speak to the relevant council officer on that? No? I'll now open it up for discussion. Councillor Fichtner.
Yeah, as the mover, I would just like to say, my decision in 1 Nicholas Street makes perfect sense and fits in with the naming scheme that fits into the methodology with which we've been applying to the naming scheme thus far, and that is wayfinding. The Nicholas Street precinct is one of the biggest projects that this council has ever undertaken. So I think that it's really important that we encapsulate the Nicholas Street name in the naming of this new building. It also offers potential for, it also is a nod to future tenants that aren't Ipswich City Council in that building as well, and being a significant identifier for them.
Thank you, Councillor Fichtner. Any other discussion?
Thank you, Mayor. I would just like to add, for the benefit of our residents, we decided when Councillor Fichtner suggested the name 1 Nicholas Street, we did have a robust discussion amongst ourselves whether or not that was appropriate, and whether or not we should be calling it what it was intended for, that is the Ipswich City Council Administration Building. Something I guess that is front of mind from me, given my background in the private or the corporate sector, noting a lot of large buildings in Brisbane. An example is 123 Eagle Street, with several private tenants involved. I guess it's important that we portray a professional image from our building. Yes, it's owned by the ratepayers, and yes, it will house the bureaucrats, but noting we do have level 2, which will see a good return on investment there once we fill that with a private tenant. The ground floor also houses our dedicated children's library, which will be a huge draw card for tourists and local residents. So I think, just in summarising, we landed on some of us have landed on 1 Nicholas Street, and that it's a good, professional representation of the building.
Councillor Kunzelman.
I'd like to acknowledge that some of the residents will be disappointed that we haven't named it after the people that they've suggested, the prominent citizens. The difficulty there remains that prominent citizens, there's so many of them, and it could be looked on as being unfair, and is unlikely to satisfy everybody anyway. So that's why we moved away from that.
Thank you, Councillor Kunzelman. I note the fact that when I think Councillor Fickner floated 1 Nicholas Street. We're very keen as a council to hear from the people who will actually be working in there. So I want to thank the CEO for doing that spot poll this week, just to go out to the council staff to see what their views were. Did they want to call it 1 Nicholas Street or Ipswich City Council, the City of Ipswich Administration Building? And it was 54%, is that correct? 54% was for 1 Nicholas Street. So I think that also weighs in our mind the people that will be turning up there day after day working for residents of Ipswich would accept that name as well. Is there any other discussion? Okay, I'll put the matter to the vote that that council name the new administration building 1 Nicholas Street. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And it's unanimous. Thank you. We move on to item B, and I'll change that slightly based on the discussions that we have had. The council name the event space, which is on that first level there, the Dandiri Room, D-A-N-D-I-R-I room, and Dandiri is the local Indigenous name meaning meeting, to meet.
I'll second that, Mayor.
And thank you. So I'll move that. Would anyone like to speak to a relevant council officer on this matter? No? I'll leave it open for discussion. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Dandiri, I would just like to point out, was one of the names suggested by residents in Shape Your Ipswich. I think it's a wonderful, not only is it a wonderful name to call the building, but obviously show of respect and acknowledgement of our Indigenous history here in Ipswich. I just would like CEO some guidance. We really do need, as we did with Tulma Place, to have the name Dandiri, I guess, fact-checked, health-checked by Queensland Museums.
So I have forwarded that email. So the CEO...
It's on the Queensland Museum website as saying it means meat. So Dandiri Maywa, if that's the right pronunciation,
It is.
meat by the water. So the Queensland Museum explicit in that, currently on their website.
Okay, so just reiterating then that it is on their website and we don't need to investigate further or perhaps write to them for a specific confirmation on this. I do note, I think council officers have also been able to confirm that it is factually correct, so...
We've had, and I think the CEO's sent that to me, I've sent that out.
Okay.
Can I just make sure that says Dandiri Room?
Yeah.
Councillor Fritz, thank you.
And Mayor, for benefit of
Yes,
the
Councillor
minutes
Miller.
clerk, maybe spell the name Dandiri.
Oh,
I
yes,
think
I can see it now.
there's one I missing.
Yes, it's D-A-N-D-I-I-R-I. Thank you, Councillor Milligan. Your eagle eyes. Any other discussion? No? I'll put that matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous and passed. Thank you. Move on to item C. And I propose a slight difference to that recommendation, that council named the balcony space adjourning the Dandiri Room, Bremer Terrace, which again was discussed amongst us councillors together. Yeah. So I'll move that, and Councillor Victor second that. Would I like to speak to a relevant council officer on this? No? I'll open it for discussion. Yes, Councillor Megan.
Mayor, just from recollection, during discussions, was it the Bremer Terrace or Bremer Terrace?
I think Bremer Terrace.
Yeah, Bremer Terrace. Thank you, Mayor. And just like to point out that, again, the name Bremer was suggested by residents
Yes.
through the Shape Your Ipswich community consultation. So it's great to see.
It was, I think, using the word Bremer was the most popular name as part of that consultation process. Any other discussion? No, there being no discussion, I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And it's unanimous and carried. We now go to item D, that council confirms Crib and Foot Lane as the new name for Icon Alley, and we note that it's the word and, not the ampersand, based on the advice that we have received from the state government, that they don't like to have special characters in the naming of things, in street names and so on. So that is Crib, A&D, Foot Lane, as the new name for Icon Alley. I'll move that. May I have a seconder for that? Councillor Doyle. I'll open it for discussion. No, I think we discussed it at the last meeting. In that case, I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous and carried. We now go to E. And I propose to change it slightly, that council confirms the renaming of Ipswich City Mall to Nicholas Street. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Fechner. I'll open that up for discussion. There being no discussion, I'll move to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous. Thank you very much. Item F, that council confirms the renaming of Union Place Mall to Union Place. I'll move that. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Fechner. I'll leave that open for discussion. Any discussion? There being no discussion, I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous and carried. Thank you very much. And last item, G. Again, it's slightly altering this. That council amends the street, and I think, Vicky, you've got this. That council amends the street numbering plan by allocating the address of 1A Nicholas Street to the proposed bar site in Tulma Place, and noting that the Ipswich Central Library remains as 3 Nicholas Street. I'll move that. Do I have a seconder for that, Councillor Kunzelman? I'll open that up for discussion. Put that matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous. And thank you to the planning team for providing us with the multiple maps, the history of the area. I now move on to item 15.2, which is the mowing season 2020-21, which I think, Councillor Fechner, was the motion that you brought forward last time. And the recommendations, and I propose that we move all three together, unless Councillor Fechner would like to do them separately. He's shaking his head. So recommendation A is that council consider increasing service standards from 9 weekly to 6 weekly mows in the local road service level at a cost of $550,000 per annum. And that B, that council consider allocating funds in the 2021-2022 financial year budget for the formation of 2 flying mowing crews, which will be 4 FTEs, who in addition to scheduled mowing will respond to CES, which is the resident, the customer request system, and overdue mowing as required. And C, that council consider allocating additional funds in the 2021-2022 budget for the use of additional mowing contractors to meet demands dependent on seasonal variations. Now, I assume that you're moving that, Councillor Fechner. And a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Jonig. In that case, sorry, I should ask for... would anyone like to ask the relevant council officer? No, I'll move the matter to open for discussion.
Just through you, Mayor, just a few comments, and big thanks to the council officers for taking up what was a pretty big challenge. We have had some quite severe weather events. The grass is growing overnight for lots of residents. But I think that in reading this very comprehensive report, you can see that council officers have taken up this task, have analysed the data, and they've presented us with a really, really great option for doing better next year, for doing better next mowing season as well. So we've got more men on the ground. We've got future plans to improve the seasonal mowing. So I just want to congratulate General Manager Sean Madigan and his entire team for really stepping up and taking up this challenge and delivering on what are our community needs. This is very much in line with the community expectation moving forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fichtner. Any other discussion? I'd just like to thank the writers of the report. It's very thorough. I found really interesting some of the graphs, especially like figure 3, where you can see quite clearly the rainfall and the corresponding increase in requests from residents. It's quite clear that. And I also see that the organisation has revised how they look after parks as well. And in particular, they talked about the high volumes of complaints and have reallocated resources to Redbank Plains, Collingwood Park and Bellbird Park. And sort of applaud the organisation. I guess I'll be supporting this report to provide additional resources to an area that our community and our residents expect. There be no other discussion. I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous and carried. Thank you very much. The next is 15.3, which is Council's response to Inland Rail, C to K, which is Calvert to Kangaroo, environmental impact study submission to the Office of the Coordinator General. And their recommendation is that the report be received and the contents noted, and B, that Council endorse the document detailed in Attachment 1 of the report by the consultant for Inland Rail dated the 8th of March 2021, which will form the submission to the Coordinator General in response to the draft environmental impact statement for the Calvert to Kangaroo Inland Rail project. Would anyone like to speak to the relevant council officer on this item? No? I'll then ask for a mover. Thank you, Councillor Fichtner. And a seconder, Councillor Doyle. Thank you. So Councillor Fichtner moved it and Councillor Doyle seconded it. Thank you. I'll now open it up for discussion.
Just
Thank
through
you,
you,
Councillor.
Mayor, I read through the entirety of Ipswich City Council's submission, and I'm really proud of all of the concerns that we raised on behalf of our community. I think it's very important that this document is being tabled here. The entire organisation came together, which is a lot of expertise in so many different fields, to make this submission to alert the project as to how this will impact on our community. I think it perfectly encapsulates a lot of, if not all of the concerns that we had as a community, and offers up some solutions for them. So I look forward to our submission being taken very seriously by the project team and considered on behalf of our residents.
Thank you, Councillor. I know that Councillor Madsen and Councillor Lyon and myself have attended many of the Inland Rail consultation sessions. We certainly have had a lot of feedback from residents in regards to the issues with the, I think, 6 level crossings, looking at, I think, 16 homes and households will have to be relocated, as well as concerns as to what's actually going to be freighted on the Inland Rail. And we made sure that those concerns are listed here. So we've made sure that our response to the Office of the Coordinator General asked for them to identify whether waste will be freighted or not, as well as the other concerns. I don't know, Councillor Ireland and Councillor Mads, if you wish to have any other speak to it, because I know you've been working very hands-on with residents.
Thank you, Mayor. I think that Councillor Madsen and I, the biggest complaint's been about noise. People are very concerned about the noise, how it's going to affect their homes and their life and their businesses.
Yeah.
And then secondly, it's about the flooding that'll occur. So, but I think more than that, Councillor Madsen and I are concerned that if the intermodal goes at Willowbank, then we need both the state and federal government to look at the Amberley interchange and the Western bypass, because if we're going to move freight around and make the PDA industrial area work, then we need to be able to flow the traffic. But they're the concerns that we've looked at. Thank you.
Correct, and I think our residents have asked for some very reasonable considerations when it comes to noise buffering, especially around Ivory Rock, which so far have been put out of hand. Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Madsen.
Just concurring with Councillor Ireland on this matter. There's a lot of just really strange ones, like a proposed level crossing on Middle Road, which they seem to persist with in the design. And other things residents have raised are concerns about impacts on koala habitat. Of course, we've had new state laws recently, but apparently that doesn't apply to a transport corridor. So, all things to work through.
I think too, when you look at the trains every 30 minutes and the trains are about 1.8 kilometres long, these things need to be taken into consideration. So I'm really pleased that our response is open to our residents so they can see that we are putting forward their concerns as well as them. I mean, the EIS was, I think, 7,000 pages long. It was a very comprehensive document and a lot for people. So and with that, I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. It's unanimous and carried. I'll now call for an adjournment. I'll see what time it is. It's 10:15, so I'll say let's come back at 20 to 11. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous. See you at Thank you very much. We're back from adjournment. It's 10:41. I note for attendance that everyone but Councillor Kunzelman is here. I'm sure she'll be... Sorry, I'll put that on. I'll put my microphone on now. It's 10:41 and we've come back from our adjournment. And I can see now that Councillor Kunzelman's on her way in here, so we have everyone in attendance. We move on to item 15.4, which is memorabilia items. And I propose that we move items A through to F as one item. And those recommendations are as per the report. The recommendation A, that council engage an auction house to sell the items which are assessed as being within the sporting memorabilia category, as outlined in the attachments 3 and 4. That B, those items which have been assessed as donated gifts to the city be reviewed as to whether council wishes to retain them within its civic collection, and those items that are deemed surplus to be either returned to the original donor where viable and appropriate, or disposed of in accordance with policy and statutory requirements. C, that efforts be made to return items that are assessed as being within the returns to the donor category. Those items that are not able to be returned be disposed of in accordance with the policy and statutory requirements. D, that those items which are listed in the requested to be returned to the former mayor category be returned if private ownership can be substantiated or they are deemed to have no value. Those that are not returned to the former mayor be disposed of in accordance with policy and statutory requirements. E, that the items in the non-valuable items for the disposal category be disposed of in accordance with policy and statutory requirements. And F, the net proceeds of disposal of these items be made available in a special community funding program to be deployed in the 2021-2022 financial year. Would anyone like to ask any council officers questions? No, so I'll move that, and Councillor Fichtner seconding that. Thank you. I'll open the matter up for discussion. I think the only discussion is probably that last point, is that whatever monies comes from here should go back to the community. In that case, I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. I can see it's unanimous. Thank you very much. We'll now move on to item 15.5, councillor representation on external groups. I'll do this one at a time. It's A through to D. So council representation on external groups, and recommendation A is that council nominate one of its councillors as the representative on the Friends of Workshop Rail Museum Committee. Would anyone like to move that? And obviously we'll go to naming someone.
Yeah, I will move to nominate Councillor Madsen as the representative on the Friends of the Workshop Rail Museum Committee.
Lovely, I think you're the natural selection. And a seconder for Councillor Madsen.
Mayoral seconder.
Thank you. So, yeah, Councillor Milligan seconded that. Would anyone like to ask the... I'll now open up for discussion. I'm checking that, Councillor Madsen, you're very happy to take on that. I know you're very passionate about rail.
More specifically, rail in Ipswich and the role it's played in building Queensland.
Yeah. You're happy to accept that nomination?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. If there's no other discussion, I'll put recommendation A, that council nominate Councillor Madsen as a representative on the Friends of the Workshop Rail Museums Committee. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous and carried. B, and I think there's already two councillors on this at the moment, that council nominates that Councillor Kunzelman and Councillor Fichtner as the representatives on the Westmoreton Diabetes Alliance. I'll move that. Would anyone like to second that? Councillor Doyle? I'll open that up to discussion. There being no discussion, I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous and carried. We'll now move on to C, which is council nominate, and I propose Councillor Milligan as an ambassador for Australian Horizons Foundation. Do I have anyone who move it? Councillor Fichtner will move it, and Councillor Kunzelman seconding it. Open up for discussion. Checking, Councillor Milligan, you're okay with that nomination?
Yes, Mayor, thank you.
Yes. Oh, so that was moved by Councillor Fichtner and seconded by Councillor Kunzelman. And sorry, Councillor Milligan, my apologies.
Yes, Mayor, I'm fine with that.
Thank you. Open. Any other discussion? No, we'll move on to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous and carried. And D, that council memberships document be detailed in attachment 1, be amended to include the memberships as resolved through items A through to C. But do I have a mover for that? Thank you, Councillor Kunzelman. A seconder? Thank you, Councillor Ireland. Any discussion? No? Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous and carried. Thank you. Move to item 16, which is the Councillor Integrity Policy Package Review. I was going to move these as a batch unless we want to separate those into separate recommendations. No? Okay, I'll move that all three recommendations that I'll read out the recommendations. A, that the revised policy titled Meeting Procedures Policy as detailed in attachment 2 be adopted. That B, that the revised policy titled Councillor Acceptable Request Guidelines and Staff Interaction Policy as detailed in attachment 4 be adopted. And C, that the revised policy titled Councillor Expenses Reimbursement and Administrative Support Policy as detailed in attachment 6 be adopted. Do we have a mover for that? Thank you, Councillor Doyle. And a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Kunzelman. I'll open it for any discussion. There be no discussion. I put the matter to the vote. Those in favour for recommendations A through to C, please raise your hand. It's unanimous and carried. We now move on to item 17.5, the Smart City Program Overview, and that recommendation is that the report be received and contents noted. I'd like to move that recommendation. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Deputy Mayor. In speaking to this motion, I note that I first called this report and this council resolved at our very first council meeting 11 months ago for this report. Many cities around Australia and the globe have advanced from smart cities programs. We have not. This paper must allow us to understand the lessons of the past so that this council can move forward to help our community in the future. The bulk of council's funding is from its rates paid by residents and grants from the state and federal government. Along with the ratepayers, I know that the state and federal governments are looking at us to see if we truly understand the consequences of the complete failure of governance by the previous council. We must be willing to do our dirty washing in public, no matter how uncomfortable it is, to ensure that we inspire confidence in the community and other levels of government. Some of the headline figures that stand out in this report are that the Smart Cities program spent $4.6 million of ratepayers' money. $1.4 million was spent on a blueprint report, which included over $350,000 in overseas travel and accommodation, which included former councillors, the former Mayor Paul Pasali, former Mayor Andrew Antonelli and Councillor Paul Tully. Credit card expenses totalling $184,120, including an additional $157,191 in travel and accommodation, was also in there. I mean, who was the card holder, and have these expenses been acquitted and audited? Another expense was $58,455 was spent on conferences, deputations and services with an unnamed supplier, just listed as ZZZ, one-time supplier. I need to say it's okay and legitimate to employ consultants and, if necessary, to travel overseas. But there needs to be a return to our community. Otherwise, it just looks like an excuse for a junket. I ask, what did the community get for this $1.4 million report? Do we have anything else other than the document, and how was this allowed to happen? I think it is great that a council seeks out opportunities like this program, but if they do nothing once they find them, you have to ask, what was the intent? The kicker is this very important line in the report, which states, there is no reportable data available relating to any increase in efficiency or improvement in effectiveness of council operations as a result of these devices. You can see why ratepayers would be cynical about councillors travelling overseas when it has been so badly abused. It is crucial to our future growth that Ipswich embraces and seizes opportunities. One of these opportunities is how digital technology and data can improve services for residents and reduce the cost to deliver these services. We are now without a smart cities mandate and without money due to the complete failure of this program to enhance the lives of hard-working ratepayers. As a council, we must learn from this complete failure of governance by the previous council and ensure that it is never repeated. I'll open the floor to any other discussion. Yes, Councillor Tully.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just make a comment in relation to a trip referred to on page 302 of the council agenda. I'm certainly not mentioned there. That was a trip to Japan and USA. I'll just put it on the record that I was not part of that trip.
Were you part of the New Zealand trip?
I was part of a New Zealand trip. Whether it's mentioned there or not, that was 2 or 3 days, my recollection. But just for the sake of
I think it's a 2015 trip, August 2015.
Yeah, just for completeness, for people who are reading that report, I wasn't not part of that Japan USA trip.
So I'm just finding the itinerary for the New Zealand trip. So attachment 4, which is number 203, Councillor Tully.
Sorry, number?
Attachment 4, 203 of 671. It's under separate cover. There was a trip to New Zealand from the 11th of August to the 16th of August.
Yes, that's what
That's my understanding from documents that you were part of that party.
Yeah, but I'll just make the point that the general specific reference in the report to the body of this report, I wasn't on that trip, on that Japan USA trip.
Thank you. Are there any other discussions? No.
No, Mayor, I think the report speaks for itself.
Thank you. In that case, I'll put the recommendation, which is the report be received and contents noted, to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And I see it's unanimous and carried. Thank you. I think it's 14, 15. We will now move on to item 15.8, which is the 2020-21 budget amendment for March 2021. And the recommendation of that report is that the proposed amended 2020-2021 budget and long-term financial forecast, as detailed in attachments 1, 2, 3 and 5, to the report by the Chief Financial Officer be adopted. Do we have a change, a suggested change to that recommendation? So I need you to...
So I'll propose that the proposed amendment, amended rather, 2020 to 2021 budget and long-term financial forecast as detailed in attachments 1, 2, 3 and 5 to the report by the CFO and amended only to include the debt refinancing transactions related to the existing loan account that was acquired for the purposes of funding Ipswich City Properties Proprietary Limited be adopted.
Thank you very much for moving that, Councillor Fichtner. Do I have a seconder to that? Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Just through you, Mayor, are you opening up for discussion?
Please do open
Sorry.
up for discussion.
So just in opening up in discussions, my proposed amendment to the officer's recommendations, as per the councillor briefing sessions that we had and quite extensive information given to the whole of the council about our debt refinancing options. So This excludes the council from engaging in major debt refinancing and restructuring outside that initial ICP loan. For completeness and to fulfil our correct legislative requirements, I do have the attachments here and updated so that we're fulfilling in completeness our legislative requirement required for the budget amendment process in line with the Local Government Act. So just to circulate with the councillors, I have these reports here.
Thank you, Councillor Fickner.
And I understand if there are questions from my fellow councillors to the CFO with regards to this as well.
Would one like me to ask the CFO to come to the lectern? I'll ask CFO.
Good morning, Mayor and Councillors. Jeff Keats, Chief Financial Officer.
Can I just confirm that you've received a copy of?
Yes, we've
of
provided
this?
a copy of those documents and I have
And
those.
what is your? So I shouldn't jump in. If you did you have some questions, Councillor Fickner?
I don't specifically have any questions, but for the group, I guess, can you explain as to why we had to have these updated documents as part of the budget amendment process?
Sure. The proposed amendment does change what was tabled in the report, and so as part of the regulations, you are required to adopt the budget and certain documents associated with those. So we felt it was prudent to provide what those documents would look like for your consideration as part of the proposed amendment, so that you've got the full documentation that would reflect that proposed amendment. And what that does is remove the market rate adjustment that would occur by removing the ability to refinance one of those loans, and then the implications on that through the rest of the long-term financial forecast. So the adjustment the adjustment in those reports that you've got reflects the fact that we would only be including the former ICP loan as part of our possible debt restructure options, and not any other loans that council has. So it does that. It does those adjustments both in the current year budget, but also in relation to the long-term financial forecast. And I can speak to the more specifics of that if you so desire.
Not so much to the debt refinancing. I'll move on to something else unless you'd like to.
No,
speak
I'm fine.
further.
Thank you.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Keach.
I think Councillor Tully would like to ask some questions.
I just would like to clarify that the wording recommended in the report compared with this is a wider range of amendments in the original wording, or the wording that's contained in your report, compared with the proposed amendment.
Sorry, Councillor, you mean the attachments? So we're looking to would change attachments 1 and 5, but attachments 2 and 3 would remain as per the original report. So it would just be replacing attachments 1 and 5 with the now amended reports, but attachments 2 and 3 don't change.
Just to clarify, I believe, Councillor Tully, you weren't at the briefing yesterday, but it's fundamentally the BAV as presented by staff suggested we would refinance two loans. One's a $24 million loan that was taken out by the former ICP, and we still will need to at least allow for that to occur, because we may need to refinance that loan to allow these buildings to be sold, because there's a mortgage across these buildings. Now, we may not need to do that, but we need to provide that flexibility in that, given that we've contracted to sell that building to Westmoreton Health. But there's a $125 million loan that's outstanding that, if we were to adjust the budget now, would allow us to refinance it this year and just provide that flexibility. But it would also mean incurring a significant meet-the-market loss in this financial year from refinancing. The amendment that's put forward by Councillor Fickner is to not contemplate that and to not budget for the significant loss that would occur from refinancing that $125 million loan, which is essentially the break fee.
That's correct.
Thank you. No, I don't have any other questions. My
No
apologies.
questions. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I now open up for discussion. Sorry, have I had a, we had a mover and seconder. Open up for discussion. I guess I'd like to note, I guess the position that we're taking when it comes to debt refinancing to be keeping all our options open. I also look at page 309, which talks about some of the changes to the forecasting, and in particular, I can see that there have been savings in the way that we're procuring items. I also note that there's been a reduction in our community, cultural and economic development area due to the COVID impacts, not being able to run events. But also note that we've had to also spend an extra $1.4 million for additional legal and consultancy costs in the planning and regulatory services area relating to complex legal matters relating to landfill appeals. So that's a cost that the ratepayers are carrying that burden of that extra $1.4 million. Thank you.
Yeah,
Councillor
just as the mover of this recommendation and in closing, I think the last thing the ratepayers would like us to do is to dig ourselves into more debt, particularly when we don't have the financial maturity to really capitalise on that short-term cash gain and the negative impacts that it has on our long-term cash flow through years 2030 plus. That is a huge undertaking that I don't think that we're ready for just yet. So I think that removing the opportunity for council to do that is in the interest of good fiscal management on behalf of this council.
Agreed, and we're still in that process of finding out what the state and federal governments will fund when it comes to some of these large infrastructure projects we have as the fastest growing council in Queensland. We know that they're going to have to fund, so we sort of need more information as well. Any other discussion? There being no discussion, I put the matter to that amended, the variation to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. It's unanimous and carried. We now move on to 15.9, which is the monthly financial performance report for February 2021. And the recommendation is that the report on Council's financial performance for the period ending 28th of February 2021, submitted in accordance with Section 204 of the Local Government Regulations 2012, be considered and noted by Council. Would anyone like to ask the relevant Council officer any questions on this report? No? I'll ask for a mover of this report. Thank you, Councillor Fechner. And a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Johnick. I open the matter up for discussion amongst councillors. No, I guess just ask you, CEO, any concerns or?
I know, we're underlying some of the complex issues that we're talking about a landfill recapping and
microphone.
refinancing. Sorry. Becoming relaxed. Apart from the complex, I guess, extraordinary items that we considered in the BAV which relate to landfill capping and potential refinancing or the options for refinancing, the organisation continues to perform better than budget, and both the underlying improvement was recognised in the BAV, but we're continuing to perform better than budget. So I think we estimated an $8 million deficit, and at this stage we're heading quite significantly better than that as the year goes on.
Thank you, CEO. Any other discussion? No, I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour of the recommendation, please raise your hand. And it's unanimous and carried. Thank you. Item 15.10, which is the report on the Audit and Risk Management Committee of the 10th of February. And the recommendation is that the report of the Audit and Risk Management Committee of the 10th of February be received, the contents noted, and the recommendations contained therein to be adopted. Would anyone like to ask the relevant council officer any questions on this matter? No? Then I'll ask for a mover. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Kunzelman. Noting that you're both on that committee, that's fantastic. I'll now open up for discussion. There being no discussion. I guess my only thing, is there anything you'd like to highlight outside this report, Deputy Mayor or Councillor Kunzelman? No. Okay, thank you. I'll put the recommendation to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. I see it's unanimous and carried. Thank you. We now move on to item 16.1, which is a notice of motion, civic celebrations. I noticed that Councillor Ireland put this forward. The motion is that council form, recommendation A is that council form a civic celebrations function to undertake and support events across the city that bring together community members and celebrate our achievements and significant events. And that B, that the events this function should undertake include Australia Day Awards, Anzac Day Ceremony Support, Remembrance Day Support, Victory in the Pacific Day Support, Citizenship Ceremonies, Achievers and Volunteers Celebration Day, Dignitary Visits, Keys to the City, Freedom of Entry, and other selected celebratory seasonal community events. And C, that expected costings for each of these proposed events, including resourcing, be provided to allow for this program to be considered during budget deliberations. Now, I'm assuming that you're moving that, Councillor Ireland?
I am, please.
And a seconder for that. Thank you, Councillor Madsen. I'll now move over to you, Councillor Ireland, to speak to it.
Thank you, Mayor. It's my opinion that Council has a role to play in improving and supporting community interactions through times of civic celebration, both required and discretionary. Following a period of interim administration, many important activities that brought the community together were not continued or continued in a way that did not capture the significance of the occasion and appropriately harness the community spirit. This motion proposes to shift the Council to become more involved in the community again by listening, learning and celebrating our successes and city achievements. So that's what I'm proposing.
Thank you very much. I'd like to open up for discussion. Councillor Tully?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I note that in paragraph B of the motion, that it's not intended to be exclusive of any other events, but, because it uses the word include at the end. But there is one that I think it was the first Vietnam Veterans Day was held in the city of Ipswich, and that's a pretty important function on the 18th of August each year. Was known originally as Battle of Long Tan Day, and I was wondering if the mover and seconder would be, just for the sake of inclusion and some degree of completeness, to include Vietnam Veterans Day in that listing, please.
I'll ask the mover. Councillor,
I'm
would you be
happy
able to move?
My list wasn't exhaustive, but I'm
Yes.
happy to include it.
Thank you. I'll just check with Councillor Madsen. Also agree, so that's a variation to that. 18th of August. Vietnam Veterans Day, 18th of August. But you don't have to have the date there. Or the Battle of Long Tan Day. Any other discussion? Yes, Councillor Madsen.
I don't mean to propose another variation, but would the seasonal, is this referring to things like Easter and Christmas, or would that possibly include a commemorative occasion like Box Flat?
Yeah, I think Councillor Madsen, obviously as a council we've been working on this for some time, and I think Councillor Ireland's wanting to formalise it. We've been obviously having discussions last year, and I think we had Councillor Ireland and Councillor Fechner and myself met with council officers, I think on the 17th of February, and so it is the intention of the organisation to come forward to have a workshop so we could actually flesh all this out. So I think this is a way to make sure that does happen, and I think those kind of things would probably be raised then.
So I haven't got the information before me, but I do understand we do every 5th Box Flat Memorial.
5th, yeah, every 5.
And then another, so I don't really have a technical wording to add to this. It's just, is there provision for that to be included in the current form?
May I suggest that we, I guess, do another variation that for B, that the events this function could undertake need to be workshopped with councillors, because obviously there's a list here of 10. That way we could cover off all those type of events for us. Would you be happy with that, Councillor Ireland, if we
I'll
talked about the fact
accept
that, which I think was planned?
Yeah,
Councillor
I'm fine
so
with that.
Councillor Ireland's okay with that? So this function, be workshopped with councillors and should undertake, and should include, and you've got those 11 items.
Through you, Mayor, just seek clarification on recommendation C, that expected costing on each of the proposed event, including resourcing, be provided.
Yeah.
So that will only happen with the provided list, or will there be further consultation so that we can be more clear to council officers as to what we're actually asking for here? Potentially a policy position on how we support and fund these and other events would be more prudent. I think that this is a great place to start, and we're opening up the conversation here, but maybe a further workshop to understand how we can formalise potentially a policy position, and to ensure that we complement the existing events program as endorsed by this council as well, so that they can dovetail together without being in conflict as well. So I don't know.
If I could propose, Councillor Fickner, when we had that meeting on the 17th of February, and we had a briefing note afterwards from the relevant area to update the civic events policy, and so I think it would be very important if we could workshop it in accordance with B, but what's very important are the budget implications. So that's a discussion that we all have to have to make sure that it's there or not, and we would discuss how that would proceed.
Sure. If I might comment, clearly the way to proceed on this would be a rework of the civic events policy that actually was adjusted.
Which is underway anyway, yes.
Yeah. And what you would do is you'd have a piece of policy work, and then you'd also have to have a piece of budget work that would deliver it.
Mayor, if I could just speak to it. I guess my point of making a civic celebration function is it's just not an event. I think we need somebody who has protocols, that knows the protocols, because a lot of them are with the services, and I think it's very important that we observe the protocols at these events.
Yeah. And we can see by my mayoral minute this morning, the Anzac Day policy, was clearly inadequate even back to 1996. So we do need to reinvigorate and get that done. So just to recap, recommendation A hasn't been touched. B, we've included that thank you, Vicky. Yes, I was going to do it, that the events this, that doesn't sound correct. That doesn't sound right. The events this function should undertake. I'm obviously looking at that this policy, the civic events policy. I just have to check here. It doesn't read well. The variation that I put up. Yes.
Mayor, if I may?
Yes.
Yeah,
Thank you. If you could stop there. Yes. Councillor Mulligan?
I am uncomfortable with the word celebrations as civic celebrations function, particularly when referring to Anzac Day and commemoration of battles.
Yeah. It's commemoration.
They are commemorations, not celebrations.
May I put forward that the civic events policy should be workshopped with the councillors and include those 11 items that are listed there. And I'm just, Ms Lucas put that up there to see if the mover and seconder are comfortable with that. And those 11 items are the 10 that's in our report plus Vietnam Veterans Day.
I would have preferred if there was some provision for any other events that we haven't included here that we may think of to be included in that.
And I think that's what the workshop will be, Councillor Madsen. Noting that item 10 is other selected celebratory seasonal community events. So that's the whole idea behind the workshop, that we'll come together and put them there.
Okay,
Which
the
is
seasonal confuses me because
okay.
Are we having a Mayflower festival?
That's up to you if you wish to put it forward, Councillor Madsen. In the end, with this... Councillor Allen, could you put your microphone on, please? No, you can't have side discussions.
Okay, I don't have a comment. I'll leave it to to Councillor Madsen.
If it's the opinion of the mayor that other selected celebrity seasonal...
Would you like to remove the word
Community events.
seasonal?
No, it's fine. If the intention is that it would be included, I'd really rather stop talking about it.
Okay. I think in the end what we're after is a workshop for us to put them all on the paper and discuss it and have it costed.
Mayor, would it encapsulate by B, the first line reading, should undertake, include but not limited to?
I think we'll do the workshop and that's why we'll get it there, if that's okay.
Just to add, we don't specify which budget period we're going to deliberate these budget implications on either. But I guess we can leave that to the workshop as well.
Yes, and I guess we'll have to put the workshop, noting that things like Anzac Day, we've made we've passed a resolution for this financial year and in the future. But yes, note, you are correct. Okay, I'll call it into discussion and I'll vote on the motion as it is on the screen. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And I can see it's unanimous and carried. Thank you very much. Item 16.2, that's a notice of motion from Councillor Ireland on customer service. And motion A is that Council take immediate action to ensure that customers have visibility over the progress, status and outcome of any service request that has been submitted utilising the existing My Ipswich service. And B, that a report be provided to a future Community, Culture, Arts and Sports Committee meeting no later than May 21, outlining how Council is currently performing against adopted standards, what steps have been taken to rectify the above issue, and any other steps that can be taken to improve the service and transparency of operations Council provides to the community. Now, I'm assuming you'll move that, Councillor Ireland, and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Madsen. Would like to speak to it, Councillor Ireland.
Thank you. Mayor, I'm receiving, and I believe a lot of councillors are receiving, feedback from ratepayers and residents of the city that they are not being kept informed on the progress or current status of service requests they have submitted to Council. Council needs to take steps to ensure that the organisation is adhering to its customer service policy at all times. Customers of Ipswich City Council have the right to be aware of the progress, status and outcome of requests raised. I think one of the issues is that they're issued with a service request number, but if they want to go in and have a look at it, they can't see what has happened. So I'm getting some feedback on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ireland. I think it might be good to ask the relevant council officer to come to the lectern.
Thank you, Mayor and Councillors. Ben Pohl, General Manager, Community, Cultural and Economic Development.
I guess I'm interested, Mr Pohl, in your views on these motions, but also the timelines that's being proposed as well.
Yeah, we're satisfied that we can certainly meet the request within the timelines as well. An opportunity to provide back to Council and the general public the process and opportunities for improving that process, I think is a good process to go through. So we're comfortable with the notice of motion.
Okay. Are there any other questions of Mr Pohl? No. Thank you, Mr
Thank
Pohl.
you.
I'll open up for discussion. I think.
No, thank you.
No? I guess in rounding off then, one of the things that we need to do is improve our customer service. And I know that we've had big changes in council, and in particular with the smart cities, there's a lot of technology as well as many other ways that council can interact with residents to let them know how their jobs are going. And so I'll be supporting this motion, and with that I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous and carried. Item 16.3 is from the Deputy Mayor. Notice of motion for expedited curb and channel program. And that motion is recommendation A, that council implement a forgotten streets expedited curb and channel program of works. B, that a report be provided to council no later than May 2021 outlining A proposed prioritisation methodology for the upgrade of curb and channel in Ipswich. B, that this prioritisation methodology, including a weighting for local stormwater issues. C, identification of locations suitable for treatment. D, identification of missing links across the city. E, high-level estimates for the program. F, summary of the previous curb and channel construction activities since 2011. G, a cost-benefit analysis of engaging an external contractor to deliver a multi-year program of prioritised framework projects. And H, development of a process through which the community may nominate potential curb and channel installation or repair projects for consideration. And then C, that a prioritised list of projects be presented for the consideration of council during the 2021-2022 budget considerations, which include identification of the top 10 curb and channel upgrade projects and identification of the top 10 curb and channel repair projects. I assume, Deputy Mayor, that you'll be moving that. And a seconder, thank you, Councillor Fechner. I'll hand over to yourself to speak to the matter, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. 2021 is the 161st anniversary of the declaration of the municipality of Ipswich. Regrettably, more than a century and a half later, there are still Ipswich streets without guttering, technically known as curb and channel. This is easy infrastructure to take for granted, but only when you have it. At a basic level, curb and channel improves how streets look, as well as how it functions. But more importantly, it can drastically improve stormwater management. I, and no doubt most other councillors, have met with residents who are frustrated that their streets lack this basic improvement. To make matters worse, these resident streets are often a missing link surrounded by other gutted streets. At the January Council meeting, I spoke about the very real sense in parts of the community that the infrastructure needs of long-established areas of Ipswich, all throughout the divisions, have been forgotten. In February, Councillor Fechner and I visited residents of McAllister Street in central Ipswich, where a lack of curb and channel appears to contribute to their properties regularly receiving teeming stormwater down from Denmark Hill. In the same month, I met with a resident of Andrews Street, Bundembra, at her property, where a lack of curb and channel sees her gravel driveway washed away with every downpour. And in the Queensland Times, earlier this month, a resident in yet another part of Bundembra expressed his frustration that a lack of curb and channel was worsening local flooding. It's clearly a widespread and long-standing issue, but I appreciate this hasn't arisen overnight, and I acknowledge the efforts of previous councils up to including this one, which undertakes annual curb and channel projects. However, I don't believe it's been enough. Now's the time to reimagine and refocus our efforts as much as we can to bring forward this important work for the benefit of Ipswich residents and ratepayers in these forgotten streets. But I want to sound a note of caution. There's no quick, easy or cheap solution to the citywide backlog of missing infrastructure. That includes for the residents of McAllister Street and Bundembra I've mentioned today. What is needed is a plan for structured, costed, methodologically sound program of works to be delivered over many years. That's what this notice of motion intends to seek.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll open the floor up for discussion. There being no discussion, I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. It's unanimous and carried. We now move to close this meeting, and in that, again, I'll reiterate, I want to pass on the city's thanks, but also this council's thanks to you, Dave, Mr. Farmer, CEO, for serving this city for 2 years. You've brought a steady hand, integrity and competency to your office of CEO, which hasn't happened for many years here in our city. So thank you very much, and we wish you all the best in the future. Thank you. Thank you, Dave. With that, I'll close the meeting at 11:26.